Hi everyone, and welcome to this very special broadcast for the Canadian Walk for Veterans. I'm Fiona Forbes, and my co-host is Brian McKenna, who is a retired veteran. Brian, thank you so much for doing this today, and thank you so much for serving our country. And maybe you can take it and tell us what this walk is and what is it all for?
Right, so yeah, thanks for being here with us. So the walk today, it's a really simple idea. We have a period of the year where it's for remembrance. Obviously, that's the first little bit of November around Remembrance Day. But this is a day where we actually want to be able to have the vets connect to the community and vice versa. Often what happens is the average person approaches me and says, you know, what can I actually do? Right? Other than vote, other than go to the polls, sure, write a letter to my MP and do all those things, by the way, because they work. But this is one of the things you can do. Your vets are in your community. And often, like here we are today, we're in Coquitlam. There's no Canadian Forces-based Coquitlam. So there's no everyday reminder that you've got soldiers around there. But there's 700,000 of us dispersed in all the different communities across this country. And so that's what today is about. We're in 7 cities, and we're walking. We're meeting people, we're listening to some good music, but we're also making sure that we're staying in contact with each other. Peer support is the thing, and this is part of it. Just physically getting out, making sure we have contact with people, and that's it. That's what we're up to.
And how important is that peer support? I mean, we're here at beautiful Lafarge Lake. Obviously, there's lots of veterans here, but there's a lot of people that have just come to support you and what you've done for our country. But how important is to have that kind of support, that dialogue, just people around you?
Well, it's absolutely critical. And I'm a bit experienced at it. The last time I got off a plane from a really difficult place was 6 years ago. But just 3 weeks back, a very good friend of mine got back from Iraq. And we're soon going to have people going to Mali. We're soon going to have people coming back from Mali. So for them, when they hear from us, that's what they're going to need to know. One of the key messages to the guys that are serving today, that are waking up today wondering, why am I suffering? Why am I different? And what do I do about it other than go to the doctor? It's the best thing out there. It's not a pill. It's not a crutch. It's what's going to get you by.
And let's talk a little bit about you and where you served. Obviously, you bought a lot of medals today. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about you. Okay,
so I served for 19 years, 5 months, and 21 days. Not that I keep it right down to the second, but that's what it was. And for me, I was medically released, so that means my injuries caught up to me. And it was the system that decided it was time for Brian to get out, as opposed to me deciding. That's a really tough thing, by the way. Mm-hmm. One of the hardest things you do. But in that period, I served 19 years, and almost every day was a great day. I loved being in uniform. You know, people thank you, and honestly, you want to thank them back. Like, you have no idea how fun my job was. It was great. There were days that were a mess. Let's be fair. But it was a fantastic time. I served twice in Bosnia. I went to Afghanistan twice. I did a number of different operations in this country for natural disaster relief, you could call it, and also working at things like when the Olympics would come to town, sometimes they would need a military involvement, Apex summits in '97. So we were always busy, and funny enough, never busy doing the thing that you were actually prepared to do.
Right.
When I joined, we were in the business of pulling out of Croatia. Well, not only did that not be what happened, we wound up in countries that I never thought we'd be going into. I'd never thought about going to Afghanistan when I, at 17, asked my mom, because I needed her signature, sign this, Mom, please. Neither me nor Mom were thinking about Afghanistan back then.
Right. And we're talking today about a lot of things, including mental health support, all kinds of support that veterans need. Maybe you can explain a little bit about what Equitas is and what Equitas does and what they're trying to accomplish.
Sure. So obviously there's a court case going on. Equitas is the organization out there that built the funding to support that. So as you can imagine, we have photocopied over tens of thousands of copies of pages because you've got to fight a court case. We have to sometimes send our lawyers to Ottawa. We have to do those things. Disbursement costs is the technical term for it. So the lawyer's firm that represents us has been providing their service for free, but we, over time, have still incurred lots of cost to make it happen. The toner cartridges got to get bought, right? And the cell phone bills have to be paid. And that's what Equitas has done. But that is a series of events that's happened over a number of years, right? And as you fight a court case, you've got brief moments of a blast of energy while you're in court. And then you've got 5 or 6 months where they're deliberating and other things are happening. While those other things are us trying to actively engage the government, sit down and say, okay, this is what we need, this is what we're asking for. So Equitas is real busy. It's not always real busy doing court things.
Right, and the court case, for those who may not know, is a class action lawsuit for what?
So it's a class action lawsuit. It's got 6 plaintiffs, and essentially it wants to find parity, not between a dream, but between what we actually used to have.
Right.
Right? We're not actually trying to get better. We're trying to get the law reinstated that used to provide pensions for injury compensation prior to 2006. That's right.
And some people might notice that you have a leash in your hand. You have your service dog, Sasha, with you today. Maybe first of all, you can explain why you have a service dog.
Sure. I get that question a lot. This is my health care. This on the end of the leash, right? She's down there doing her job. Right now, her job is to do nothing because there's no problem right now.
Right.
But for me, if a lot of people were to crowd into this space between you and I, or she felt a threat in some way, all she would do would be to politely move herself between me and those people.
Right.
But there's also nighttime. My wife will tell you a different story, but in theory, the dog wakes me up when I have nightmares. What actually happens in the last little bit is the dog wakes her up to then wake me up. So we got a little bit of adjusting to do, but a nightmare can last a long, long time. But with this dog, I don't wake up in sweats. I don't wake up with my neck all strained and my body all sore from tossing around for 20 minutes because I toss around for 10 seconds.
Right. And we've been talking about etiquette in service dogs. It says ask before petting. Sasha's working. The other etiquette is to not ask what somebody's medical condition is.
Right.
So that's why I didn't ask you that question. But perhaps because we're here, maybe you can explain a little bit more about it.
Sure. And so for the folks out there that, you know, you're walking around, you're going to see service dogs in public, and you're probably going to start seeing a lot more of them too, because we're just starting to realize what these dogs can do. So yeah, on etiquette, talk to the person, right? The person is the one you're going to be engaging with anyhow, so we just ask that people don't go talk to the dog and don't go right up to the dog. Just like your dog at home, pets are rewards. Contact, verbal eye contact or physical contact with the dog is a reward for what it just did. So you coming up and talking to the dog is essentially saying, great job for whatever just happened. Well, maybe that's not something that should be rewarded, and the rewards need to come through us. So that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about etiquette, is the person is still the person. And you wouldn't walk up to anyone else and go, what diabetes type do you have? Or how's your cough coming along?
Right.
And so don't do it to me. But you can say hi and you can ask me what my dog does. In fact, that's a great start. If you're really interested and the person looks like they're approachable, ask that, because that's where it'll all start. What jobs does your dog do? What can your dog do for you? That kind of stuff.
And how integral has Sasha been to you in your life and making your life more livable and better?
Right. So I'm out here today. There was a time where I was on my couch. I didn't go out. I avoided all events that had a lot of people in them. Today is still a struggle for me. This is not easy, and this will be the only thing I do today, by the way, because a couple hours of being out and about, and it kind of is my limit. That limit was my front door before, right? So I'm shopping, I'm taking the kids to school. I'm slowly able to steal back bits of my life that went away because of the dog. So that's what it is.
How long has Sasha been in your life?
I've had her for 4 years.
And what do you tell other veterans about your experience having a service dog and what it could do for them to improve whatever their condition may be?
Right. So first of all, you're going to get busy. The dog should show up. If you're getting a dog from a reputable organization, you're going to get a dog that's well trained, but not necessarily well trained in dealing with you. This dog is trained to recognize my body heat changes, my breathing changes, what a normal sleep for Brian is, not anyone else. So you're going to have to put in a lot of work doing that. And it's going to be some tough work because some of the training will involve you having to mimic the problems you have so we could train that for the dog. So it won't be easy. You're looking at about 6 months of work. So that's the tough side, and I always give the guys the tough side.
Worth the payoff?
Oh yeah. Your past life is behind you for a reason, so I never tell people you can get it back. But you can certainly claw back pieces of it that have been taken from you. So yeah, for me, it was one of the right answers. I'm not going to tell everyone that a dog's going to solve all your problems, but for me, it's been absolutely helpful.
Well, they are wonderful creatures and do wonderful things for people. And thank you for sharing that story. Brian and I are going to be sharing a lot more stories with you from right across the country. As we mentioned, the first annual Canadian Walk for Veterans is in 7 cities across the country. And right now what we're going to do is we're going to check in with St. John's.
How's it going? Tom okay here at St. John's Walk for Veterans location here on Kitty Vitty Lake. It's a fine 3-degree morning in Newfoundland weather. We're looking forward to getting started now here in a few minutes and can't wait. It's a beautiful day for it. We're going to enjoy it.
But Alyssa was very proud to be part of a military family. My father is Tom Kavanagh, and my brother is Warrant Officer Corey Kavanagh. So we're here, and we're walking in honor of Alyssa, or in memory of Alyssa, in honor of her grandfather. So we've been waiting to do something to honor him and her name. So we just donated $200. If we had known or had more time, we probably would have raised a little bit more. But we just wanted to do that. Very important.
Yeah, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a great thing you're doing. Thank you. Today we hold the first annual Canadian Walk for Veterans. When you walk in the Canadian Walk for Veterans, you lend your voice to a collective declaration of Canadians across the country who pay tribute to our men and women who have served Canada's military. An opportunity to get to know the veteran in a fun and informal way and walk shoulder to shoulder with them. There are many veterans here today from different eras of service. Each one of us have a unique story that is different from one another. I am hoping for those who are willing to share their story, they have an ear that is willing to listen, to have an understanding what the men and women of our armed services has gone through. But most importantly, we cannot forget the family that stands by that veteran's side throughout the whole ordeal, through training, through deployments, after deployments, or any other traumatic experience that happens. The family takes the brunt of that. So let's enjoy this day and begin the first annual Walk for Veterans.
There you go.
Welcome back, everyone. We are here at the beautiful Lafarge Lake in Coquitlam for the first annual Canadian Walk for Veterans. My co-host is retired veteran Brian McKenna, and we're talking about so many interesting topics today. And we're going to talk about caregivers. Brian, maybe you can just tell us a little bit about caregivers, who they are, and what they do once somebody gets home.
Sure. So a lot of folks, when they hear the word caregivers, they think institution. And we're talking home, we're talking family. And that's one of the things that happens. Now, you got to look back to our World War II vets. You know, we still have tens of thousands of them around, and a lot of them out-survived their spouses. So when we're talking caregivers, sometimes we're talking a 60-year-old daughter, a 55-year-old son, or a 23-year-old wife. That's what we're talking about in terms of providing care. There's also the thing that a lot of the stuff the average person can do, your ailments block you from doing. So a good friend of mine, he's actually heavily involved in the court case, one of the plaintiffs, he can't change his light bulbs because he's in a wheelchair. And so I don't have to hire someone to change a ceiling fan. I just spend the dollars and get it done. Well, to their family, that's either someone else does it or a new expense comes into the family. So those are some of the things we're looking at is who's making the meals? Not just can you eat them, who's doing the grocery shopping? And in a lot of our families, we're finding that the spouses, for people particularly with mental health problems, the spouses are doing 80% of the living, of making the family run, dropping the kids off at school, that kind of thing. And so that's who's making this run, and they pay a price.
Yes, and speaking of paying a price, are caregivers compensated in any way? I mean, when we're talking about caregivers, we usually think of a professional like what you're talking about, but are caregivers compensated?
There is a benefit out there for them. I say a benefit. Most of them don't qualify. When you read the application sheet, it's written specifically for physical injuries. It doesn't take the mental health side into account, and it is, even for those that qualify, quite paltry compared to what a lot of us in the advocacy world think it should be. A very, very common case, Fiona, is that the spouse doesn't work or takes a job at way less of their possible pay and possible capability level because of the level of care they have to provide. You know, you see things like people turning down promotions, or she would actually be making more than him due to her qualification level, but that's not how the family has to function. So it's a big problem in the world of veterans advocacy, is getting someone to not only compensate them, help them qualify for the compensation, because that's a struggle, and then maybe we'll talk about getting the compensation to actually recognize what they give up.
What happens when a veteran comes home and they have no family?
Yeah, that happens more than you think. And sometimes they actually come home thinking they have a family, and then they don't. Divorce is a big thing when people are suffering. It's a big thing in a lot of communities that are frontline first responders, military, that kind of thing. It happens. We not only have that, we have people that are very adept at living on their own and surviving in the bush. There are a lot of veterans right now living in the middle of nowhere.
Choosing to be alone.
Well, it's actually easier for them.
Yeah.
First of all, they're qualified in living in the bush. Their mental health issues are easier dealt with when they're on their own, and there is no family. You'd be surprised how often that happens. And I was personally surprised at how many homeless veterans we have. I knew we'd have some.
Right.
I didn't know to the level that we would.
And how do they get help?
Well, the funniest of ways, I found 3 myself in the year 2016, and 2 of them I found by bus drivers. People are cold, buses are warm, homeless people ride transit just so that they can warm up. So the transit guys, including the transit security, they know who all these people are. And it was them coming to me saying, there's a homeless vet here, and he rides this bus at this time to warm up. There's one at this station here.
And you reach out to them?
You reach out. They don't always want to be reached out to. Some do.
Excellent stuff. Well, thank you once again for all you're doing to help our veterans. And we have walks happening right across the country today. And right now we're going to check out the walk that's happening in Fredericton.
at the stage there. People are overeating and all over the place right now, so they haven't really got filed in yet. But you got to see this. This is Canadian Walk for Veterans First. It's goat yoga. Check it out. A whole bunch of little goats.
This is a really special and unique event, and we're hoping to set the standard of veteran love towards the community. First of all, thank you to everybody. And then this shows how much the community loves the veterans. Pretty incredible.
You're live. So that's it for right now at Kingston. They're on their way walking, and so I'm going to have to head up to Ottawa now. So I'll catch you guys up there, okay? Take care. Have fun. Have a great day, everybody.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Lafarge Lake. I'm Fiona Forbes and my co-host today is retired veteran Brian McKenna. And Brian, we're going to talk about injuries right now. Maybe first of all, you can tell us what kind of injuries do people come home with?
Right. So first of all, for myself, I have no problem speaking about this openly. For me, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder a number of years ago. I also got a bug in my intestine when I was overseas that killed about 6 inches of my guts. So that creates a lot of trouble in life. But you don't look at either of those two and see a wound. So there's those kinds of things that are out there. There's a lot of internal injuries. We've got people missing organs, and we've got exposure injuries as well.
And of course we have the other kinds of injuries that are more visible injuries that people would recognize. But let's talk a little bit about toxic exposure.
Right.
And maybe specifically you can tell us your story and how that happened to you, because people wouldn't think of that as an injury, getting a bug.
So you find yourself in situations overseas, you got really healthy food on base. When we were in Bosnia, most of it was flown in from the Netherlands. But that's not what you're always eating. When you go out and do your job, you have to interact with local people. It's part of it. And indulging in what some of the people offer you, which is the local water, the local food, all the bugs that are happening at the time in the local diet.
Your body's not going to be accustomed to it.
No, and it's easy to say, well, just don't have it, but that's not the way these things actually function. You go on patrol in a community and you need to know what that village elder thinks. You're going to have tea with him today. That's how it goes. And you can pick up all kinds of bugs from things like that. Before you go overseas, the government rightfully will know the things that go on in that area. We still go to places that have yellow fever problems. We have to make sure we're inoculated against all those things. But off you go and you're going to do your job. You're going to breathe in that air. I spent a lot of time in Kabul. When Kabul was designed, it was designed with about 40,000 people in mind. Over 6 million people live there. So the sewers aren't ready for 6 million people. Sewage is open. Sewage is not a closed system in a place like that where it goes into pipes and just goes away like we have here. Sewage is the roads. And so we have a lot of people getting sick from things like that. We're also finding that some of the things that we thought were good injections to give you back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s weren't great ideas. And in some cases, those things kept continuing on. So you have things like, for me, I think back to the final X, we call it FTX, at the end of your basic training. And I'm eating salmon in a bag that's 4 years old. Well, how does salmon still edible after 4 years? Well, a lot of things to make it still edible. A lot of preservatives and chemicals.
Right.
You're running through smoke, white smoke, that at the time they told us was fine. Now they tell you it's carcinogenic. You can be on a base that might have had Agent Orange trained on or used during training on it.
Right.
There's a lot of different things in that regard when we talk about toxic environments.
And a lot of things that we wouldn't think about with toxic environments. I mean, you usually traditionally think of chemicals and not some of the things that you're speaking about.
Right.
So how are these injuries, the ones that we wouldn't necessarily think about that you touched on, how are they cared for when you're diagnosed?
So that's the difficult thing. First of all, you not only have to show that, yes, you have this injury, you also have to be able to tie it into an event, right? So the Veterans Affairs Canada doesn't turn to you and say, well, this happened to you in your past 20 years and just assume it's your military service. You now have a case on your hands, and you actually have to act like your own patient, advocate, sometimes doctor and lawyer, to try to get these things through. I look back to the year 2004, for example. We lost people in Afghanistan, a couple. But we also lost from an air crash. We also lost from a toxic environment where Lieutenant Saunders was killed in a submarine from smoke inhalation. So there's all these things that take our members, not just combat, right? And then for those that are wounded from it, proving that, yes, I was in that submarine incident in 2004, and that's why I have breathing problems in 2018. It's a really tough link, and the government makes it a tough link.
Okay, well, we'll find, if you want to find out more information, where can people go?
Well, talk on Facebook, and there's all kinds of things you can do for us. If you want to get through to one of the different advocates out there, just find the Equitas webpage and tell us that you've got a question about toxicity issue. We know the different advocates out there on the individual specific files. You can even tag Brian McKenna, and I'll sort you out. I'll put you through.
Thank you so much, Brian. We're going to take a quick break right now, but we will return with more from the Canadians Veterans Walk. Hi everyone, welcome back to Lafarge Lake, where the Canadian Walk for Veterans is going on right behind us here. I'm Fiona Forbes, and my co-host today is retired veteran Brian McKenna. Now, Brian, mental health is a massive topic, and there are so many components to it. But first of all, maybe you can define mental health and veterans and what kind of conditions that we're actually talking about.
Right. So one of the things I always tell people when they ask me that exact point is we don't own PTSD. It's been around for a long time. Police officers have it. Assault victims have it. We have it too. So we're part of the fabric of society that deals with mental health issues. We don't have our own. We have it caused from a unique place, and often it's hard to assume that the person in front of you is that person suffering. So we have cases routinely where a 21-year-old goes into a hospital and presents himself as having issues, his problems. And it's not assumed that maybe we should ask if this guy got blown up in Afghanistan. Maybe he has traumatic brain injury, TBI, from the concussion of his LAV driving over a mine. It's not the average question that you would be asking in an emergency room in this country. But in some communities, that's exactly what's got that guy in that door. We've got folks suffering from anxiety, from severe depression, from post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's part of what we need to do in the advocacy world. It's not just that they exist, it's educating the already present medical care professionals that some of these kids are only 19 and they have this.
Yeah.
Some of the guys that are 85 and only talk to other 85-year-olds because they think they're the only ones that get it, they have it too. You might have called it shell shock during their time.
Right.
Or they might have been kicked out for being weak or not enough heart, as they used to say. It's mental health.
And where can veterans turn to? I mean, obviously your medical care professional is one person that you should turn to, but other than that, because when you're talking about PTSD, depression, anxiety, and things of that level, you need constant support. So what other avenues can veterans explore to get help?
Yeah, so peer support, we've mentioned. It's one of the key things to do. Other people that have been there they will help you skip some of the unnecessary parts of the conversation so you can just get to what's actually going on. If you can find someone that was at least at that place or in that environment that knows it, that just makes the conversation so much easier. But online is good. One of the guys that I wound up talking to when I was going through trouble was a former UN observer from Norway. And it just happened, first of all, he was on when I was on.
Right.
I was messaging at a particular time due to time zones. He was there. And we'd both been in Yugoslavia. And so there was a bond there. And, never met him up until a couple of years ago. But that was helpful. It was more helpful than had I walked into an emergency room and said, hey, I'm a veteran and help me. I mean, that's not going to get you anything. But that guy helped me a lot.
It makes the world certainly smaller, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
And there's lots of peer support out there for you. We're going to continue talking about mental health issues, but first of all, we're going to take a short break, and we will be back with more right after this. Stay tuned.
The biggest challenges I have, and many people that have come back from a hard tour over there and couldn't carry on in their service to Canada, it's sometimes difficult to go to a Remembrance Day, and it's something that we have an obligation in our hearts as servicemen and women to go to that, but it is hard. And sometimes, like in 5-6 years ago when I wasn't doing as well as I do now, it's something that could cause a bit of a downward spiral, and it could go on for weeks or months in the winter months, and we can lose people. And hopefully it grows to a national event and it will continue on to be something for everybody to look forward to every spring. If you're having a tough weekend on a January or a February when the snow's up going over your door, hey, I'm going to make it to the walk.
I just wanted to thank you all on the name of caregivers and spouses to come and encourage us, because when you live with someone who served before, you are part of a unit, right? So thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much for that. And joining us now is John McComb. He's emceeing the Veterans Walk today here at Lafarge Lake. And John, what brings you to this event and also brings you to support what the veterans are doing?
I've been involved with the Equitas Society now for, I guess, 5 or 6 years, since the early days of their class action lawsuit against the federal government. And to me, it made me angry in the early days. Well, it still does. That Canadian veterans really are, in many ways, fighting the fight of their lives against their own federal government to try to get the kind of resources, the kind of support, the kind of pensions that they actually need to carry on after their military careers are over. And it just boggles my mind, Fiona, how a federal government can put up the kind of opposition, legal opposition. Of course, the federal government has unlimited funds, and so they can drag a court case out for many, many years, which is what's happened. So that kind of got under my skin a bit, and so I've been as often as I can. I try to help out the Equitas Society and their support of Canada's veterans.
And Brian, what does it mean to you to have the support of voices like John McComb for the message that you and your fellow veterans are trying to get across?
Well, there's two things. So first of all, we get the radio personality that everyone in Vancouver knows, John McComb from John McComb Show, but you also get the citizen that he is, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not just the on-air things that you can do to help out. There's also the fact that he actually really, really cares about this stuff. And you can feel that as a vet when people are really behind you. That's also why today is kind of important. There's all kinds of ways that people can communicate their support to veterans. Sometimes it's an email, sometimes it's a text, but still, it really helps when people are physically there. Yeah. So we appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And John, what has it been like for you today? Of course, a lot of people participating in the walk. I've been watching you interacting and obviously hearing stories from veterans. So what have you been soaking in today as far as hearing these stories from our veterans?
Well, one of the things that touches me very closely is the mental health side of things, because I've had my own battles with mental health issues, and one of the stats that was mentioned earlier, that more of our soldiers have taken their own lives because of mental health issues and lack of support than were killed in Afghanistan. I mean, to me, that's just unfathomable that happens. So I have I don't know, I guess I have a bit of a personal stake in it, because I understand, I don't understand what they went through, because I've never done that, but I do understand depression, and I know what PTSD does, because my dad had PTSD after the Second World War, and so I understand the havoc that can wreak on families. So yeah, there are a lot of strings that attach, but that's the thing that I hear most often is that people coming back with PTSD aren't immediately looked after and dealt with and helped, and I think that's just terrible. That's wrong.
And Brian, we've been talking a lot about mental health today. We've been talking about your support dog, about PTSD. How important and integral is that support and getting it immediately to veterans? Maybe you can speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, so it does have to happen right away, and it has to be taken seriously. And that's one of the problems we encounter. If you were to walk into the medical inspection room with anything obvious and apparent, it's going to be handled. It's going to be handled right away, because the government not only wants to get you back at work, you could represent hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars of investment. They want that investment working. So they see it. The broken leg gets treated, the scrapes get treated. But that's not necessarily how it goes when you turn to them and say, I haven't slept properly in 4 months. Yeah. I'm having fights and arguments every day at home, and that's not me. That's not what I do. And then it's a bit of a struggle. Sometimes you have to convince people that this is a serious thing, that there's actual loss to your life here. And even today, we've come so far. We've done so much. But even today, when I hand you certain applications that a veteran might have to fill out and go through, and you read it, and none in there actually pertains to this and this. Yeah. Everything is, how far can you walk, how much can you lift?
That's exactly right.
So we got room to go. We got a lot of room to still move.
And John, what do you hope walks like today? It's expanded from just being a tiny walk last year in Burnaby to right across the country. What do you hope walks like today accomplish?
Well, we were talking about it earlier. I think the big thing is Canadians. A vast majority of Canadians support our veterans. I mean, that's an easy one. People admire and have a great compassion and passion for what our military does on behalf of Canada. The only time, though, that there's really any sort of interaction is on Remembrance Day, and people come out, and that's fine. But I think there need to be more of these, more walks next year, and make this thing grow across Canada, because the one thing I hear from people is, well, how can I help? How can I show my support? Well, this is a perfect example. We've had a bit of rain today, but a nice, Sunday morning, come out and take a kilometer walk around the lake and maybe make a donation, or just say thank you for everything you've done for Canada. These kind of things, I think, are in a lot of ways are far more accessible for people, and I'd love to see it expand.
Absolutely. Well, John, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Seeing the walk today. Speaking of being right across the country, we're going to check in to see how the walk is going on in Edmonton right now.
Good day, everyone. My name is Frank Farrell. I'm a veteran of 1 CER, 2 deployments in Afghanistan, and today we are here at the Canadian Walk for Veterans, and I'm here with our fellow volunteers.
Chance Burrows, I'm here, also an engineer.
Tim Baxter, engineer.
Chuck Isaacs, engineer. We've all been doing this quite a while.
We're here at beautiful Rundle Park in Edmonton. How do mental health challenges affect the daily life of veterans?
Well, that's a broad question, and it's wide open because I think mental health difficulties affect everybody in a different way. It's a very individual battle that you have against your personal demons, as it were. And for some people, that can take the form of forgetfulness. It can affect your memory. My wife has to constantly remind me to take my medications and things like that. So it can affect you that way. Obviously, the big ones, depression, major depressive disorder, which I've gone through myself. It's horrible. Clinical depression is just it's a terrible thing to have to experience. And so anything that we can do as an organization or as a group to mitigate that, I think is very important work. Yeah, absolutely. Mental health is a huge issue for the veteran community.
To further elaborate on that, perhaps you could address some of the costs that are associated with being injured or physically injured.
Man, where do you start? I used to be pretty handy around the house, and now, unless it's between here and here, there's not a lot I can do in terms of swinging a hammer or sawing lumber and all that kind of stuff. So every time something goes wrong with my house, I would have taken care of it myself before. Now I've got to hire somebody. I've got to throw money at the problem. So it becomes very expensive in very short order to be a homeowner and to be, seriously disabled at the same time. So that's the gist of the walk, is to bring awareness, but also to raise funds for a new veteran organization which can move forward and represent the interests of Canada's disabled veterans.
What are some of the things that a veteran probably couldn't do on a day-to-day basis that they could do had given the opportunity to have a service dog?
So going out in public, that's a big thing, right? Yeah, that's where everything is.
Yeah.
So, just everyday tasks, going to the grocery store, running some errands, that could help just really in that structure.
Let's get going, people! Big problem.
Hi everyone, welcome back once again to Lafarge Lake for the Canadian Walk for Veterans. My co-host Brian McKenna has been sharing a wealth of information and stories, and we're talking about mental health. And people like me, average people, might want to help veterans and don't know how they can help. So maybe you can explain when it comes to mental health issues, if you want to reach out to somebody, what's the right way to do it, or how do you do it?
Well, it depends what you're comfortable with. One of the things, for my personal situation that helped me, if you ever donated $1 to Citadel Canine, you helped me.
Which is where Sash is from.
If you're a member of the Legion supports the Veterans Transition Network, and my personal care on that program cost thousands. Mm-hmm. So if you've supported a Legion program, you supported me. So there's all kinds of ways that you, the Canadian citizens, have supported me, and this walk is one of them as well. And that's why we're doing it. We wanted to be able to give people a tangible way in their own community that they could go and do exactly that.
Okay, wonderful. And, over the past few years, it does seem like people's attitudes towards mental health have changed a bit. I think people are a little bit more informed on mental health issues and perhaps a little bit more understanding. Is that true?
I agree with that to some degree. I certainly don't have to spend as much time as I used to explaining the nature of the injury. Just imagine having a broken leg and having to explain to someone the very thing they're seeing in front of you. And that's what it sometimes felt like in the world of mental health. I have to admit, when I came forward, my chain of command treated me very well. At the same time, other people coming forward did not get treated the same as I did. And so that was kind of the transition period where the military was coming around. Well, it's come around now. My assumption, but also it's an educated opinion, is you come forward, you're going to get treated seriously. And I want to make that clear to people. You're not going to have to spend as much time as our forefathers did explaining the nature of the problem. People get it. Yeah, anxiety is a thing. Depression's a thing. So we are there. We've kind of won that stage of the battle.
And when it comes to mental health, there unfortunately still is a stigma. No matter who you are, when you have depression, anxiety, PTSD, how would you advise people to change that stigma if they have it?
Well, I had it. right?
Interesting.
I had it, and I struggle with that today. I wonder sometimes, did I ever shut the door that should have been left open, or make assumptions? And even when I was dealing with problems on my own, since I had that stigma before, I then didn't want to have that problem. So let's find something. Let's find something else. There's got to be something else wrong with me, right? Because I don't want it to be that.
Yeah, that's why I was having
You tie into that the specific diagnoses of things like severe PTSD normally become career enders. And so people also wonder, not only how am I going to be treated, how am I feed my family a couple months from now? What's that look like? How do I get that done? There's a lot of hurdles still to that guy opening the door and going to seek help.
And once again, lots of resources out there, but where do you suggest if somebody does want to reach out, if they're having troubles, where would you recommend?
So I've been active online. I found that to be helpful because it brings an anonymity to the care. In other words, you can get peer support without necessarily having to knock on someone's door. I have to say, though, some of the dyed-in-the-wool programs, the things that have been around there for a while, are actually really good. The Veteran Transition Network was key for me. Dogs was helpful to me. You know, find a buddy, find what worked for him, try it. Steal, borrow, whatever you want to call it. If it works, try.
Try it, see if it works. Well, thank you, Brian. We're going to take a short break, but we have a whole lot more coming up for you for the Canadian Walk for Veterans.
Ashley Patter, who we've been listening to all along.
And the topic we're going to tackle right now is transition, coming home. Coming home sounds great, but it's difficult for people to come home and transition into a life once they retire. Maybe you can explain how transition is for veterans.
So transition can be very difficult. It depends how you come back. One part of coming back for me was landing in Edmonton, where the town, the base, the whole environment expected to see half a battalion get off the plane and come home. So it was the way you would expect. There was flag waving, there was old ladies and gentlemen awake at 1 a.m. to serve us coffee. I'll never forget that, by the way. We speak of things that tear you up. That one gets to me sometimes. I still remember those people.
Things that people can do.
Yeah, it is. It's those things that matter. But that's part of the come home. Then we left there 2 days later, and I come home to my community, and I'm the only guy getting off the plane from Afghanistan at Vancouver Airport. So it's a completely different walk home, just depending on where that escalator happens to be in the country, what airport are you arriving in at, right? If you're getting home to Mississauga, might be a lot of people. You know, if you're going to Chilliwack, might not be. And so that's part of it. But transition doesn't just mean coming out of a war zone. Transition also means, how are you going to be the next plumber, the next project manager out there in the community? And what we find, Fiona, is not just changing jobs, it's changing culture. We have our own music, we have our own way of talking, we have our own languages. Before the camera came on, we had to figure out what the acronyms meant, because that's how we talk.
Right.
And unfortunately, sometimes you got to listen to people tuning up bagpipes. That's part of our culture too, because she lives not too far from a military institution. We have our own culture. That's our way. In some ways, I say it with a smile, but it's been compared to being released from jail almost.
True.
In you are leaving this walled environment, you're going out there now, right? The military environment, there's no such thing as late. You may have to be on this specific grid square at 8:52 and abandon it at 8:53 because it's going to be blown up. That guy then goes into the real world where 8:53 doesn't really matter. You just text me if you're going to be late, right? Well, that culture shift is really different. But the other things you have to learn, budgets matter, for example. Businesses live or die off the bottom line. Well, we don't come from that environment. We come from an environment where, let's be honest, if we needed more bullets, there were. So there's a lot of learning and a lot of culture change that has to happen. And the easiest part of that is actually the job finding things, the aids to help you with your application, your interview process, and they exist. We want more of that, by the way. There's a lot of good stuff out there. I know guys been successful in helmets to hard hats, for example, was a good program. But we need to nail down that transition piece, and the military needs to nail that one down before we transition you, before we send you out the door.
So what's missing to help veterans transition then?
Well, there's a lot of checklists as you're leaving, and it's generally, does he have this form, has he attended this briefing? There's briefings about getting out, but the back end of a conversation like we're having means you then got to stop talking and listen to the other person, and that's not happening in the culture change that needs to happen as a person releases from the military. You get a lot of the system saying, okay, here, go to this briefing, and here's this and here's that. A lot of vets, for example, have joined the military when they were 17. Then they serve 20 years, and then they realize, what's this thing I have to apply for? There's provincial health care, or what's that about? Because they've always just gotten it from the government. And so simple things like that are being missed. You can imagine the big things about getting you ready for that environment out there are being missed as well.
Well, thank you so much once again, Brian. As we said, it's the Canadian Walk for Veterans. It's happening in 7 cities across the country, and right now we are going to check in with Victoria. Welcome back, everyone. We are joined now by Scott Casey. He is a retired veteran. He just finished his walk, and he's also the president of Military Minds. First of all, how was your walk?
It was great. Thank you very much.
Good.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
It's great to be here today, despite a little rain. It's a great cause to get together for. And Scott, maybe you can tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do with Military Minds.
Okay, Military Minds is a peer support organization. We deal specifically with combat PTSD, but we also have been doing outreach with first responders, law enforcement, firefighters, paramedics, that sort of thing. We've been doing this sort of work since 2012, and we provide support globally to about 135,000 people. So it's a full-time job.
And talking about peer support, how important is that to you when you get home?
It's one of the key survival tools in this whole thing, Fiona. So, like with Scott, we've met in person many times, but the first time we met was online, and he needed someone in the community that I lived in. So it was more an appeal of, hey, is there anyone in Surrey, anyone in Delta? Well, I happen to be that guy. And a couple weeks later, after getting involved and helping, I went to it. I went to it as the guy. Like, okay, now I need some of this. So it's one of the key things. When someone brings me a veteran and says, you know, this guy needs help, the first thing I'll do is just try to figure out what his healthcare situational needs are. Because he needs a hospital right now. Once I know that answer, that's the next thing I do. Is I figure out what version of Scott's organization is the right thing to put this person in contact with.
And tell us a little bit more about the organization and what kind of peer support that you are providing for veterans.
Well, we have, there's different levels. Number one is, and our major one is the internet side of things, the Facebook and also our email avenues where people can write into us and discuss issues that they're having. It's all anonymous. We know who they are, but the confidentiality is there. We don't discuss what happens on the inside. with anyone. So that's been one of the best parts of it. People can come to us knowing that it's a possible career ender, and they open up to us. We figure out what they need, and we align them with the correct resources in their area. So whether that person is in Kapuskasing in Ontario, or if they're in Norway, we find out what's.
So you're global.
We're global, yeah. We look online and we connect them with those services in their area. So it's something that nobody else has done. We were the leading provider in that side of things, and now we're also on the ground here in Canada with our latest, the Rolling Barrage motorcycle rally we did last year, and we're creating those networks, and we want to provide that place where people can come to us face to face as well. So we're working on that right now.
And how important is that peer-to-peer support? Somebody who understands your situation and you understand them and what they've been through and what they may need.
So I think it's absolutely essential. And what we find is healthcare professionals will get you to a certain point, but what Scott just said is very important. There might not be any in your community. But, a bullet's a bullet, a shell's a shell. And we have put 21-year-old Afghan vets in the same room as guys from the Korean War, guys in their 80s, and they know what they're talking about. And even if they don't get talking, sometimes just having that little bit of the guy knows. You're just in the presence of someone that knows. And that's what I say whenever vets bring this stuff up to me. Just be around other guys that know what you're talking about. You solve that problem, you've got something solved today. And then the peer support can take you to the next level. That's it. Medicare, critical. I'll never turn it down. But the guy needs something once the doctor goes on to the next patient.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you briefly mentioned the motorcycle ride you're doing. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that, because it's coming up this summer.
Right. We launched the Rolling Barrage last year in the month of August. It was a cross-Canada motorcycle rally. Started in St. John's, Newfoundland. We rode through in 15 days to Victoria, stopping along the way in major centres and smaller communities as well. And we did 8,700 kilometers, no accidents, no injuries. It was a great process to have people come out, and it's not just directed at veterans and first responders, it's people that support them as well, Canadians. So, we saw thousands of people come out and lining the side of the highways and overpasses and waving and flags, and it was fantastic. So there's a natural healing process that comes in that as well. We get guys together and ladies, that have served and or support, and it just creates a great community. Much like, this Canadian Walk for Veterans, walking around here today, there's people together and
interacting.
That's what it's about,
stories,
right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And what's the website if people want to find out more information?
People that want to check out the Rolling Barrage, they can go to therolling.barrage.com, and everything's up there, our dates, events, parts of the organizational side of things. So if they want to know when they can be somewhere and where, it's all in there.
And Military Minds? Where can
Military
they find you?
Minds, same thing, militaryminds.com. Militaryminds.inc.com. And we also, of course, have Facebook pages for both. So social media is...
Where to find you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today and for being here at the walk. We're going to take a quick break right now, and we'll be back with more right after this.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Canadian Walk for Veterans. It's happening in 7 cities right across the country. We, of course, are here at Lafarge Lake in Coquitlam. And I'm Fiona Forbes, by the way, and my co-host today is Brian McKenna, who is a retired veteran. And we want to end things off talking about creating change, because that's what this walk is all about. That's what advocacy is all about. So how can people help to create change?
Right. So on that, I follow what a lot of other people say, which is vote, but there's something to add to it. Vote in all 3 elections. Yes, for veterans issues, obviously Veterans Affairs Canada is a federal department, but healthcare is delivered provincially, and access to that healthcare is sometimes done municipally, all the way down to First Nations. We have a lot of veterans from the First Nations community who have their own form of government. So influence all the forms of government for the things that affect veterans. That's one of the things I always tell people.
And what are some of the things that aren't happening to help veterans in 2018?
So we've been hoping for many years and been told for many years that a lot of our processing will get changed for things like benefit of the doubt, for example. Take a paratrooper who smashes into the ground 120 times over his career. One would assume he's going to have bad ankles. You would assume that. I would assume that. But he still has to fight that claim. And it's very hard at the end of a 20-year career of doing that to show someone on which day and which jump did I hurt my hip. On which day, bumbling down the roads of Bosnia and Afghanistan, did I get the neck pain that I've developed. So we're having a lot of trouble with the injuries that compound over time and getting that sorted out. There's also secondary issues. So if someone loses their legs, for example, a lot of people will look at the obvious and say, okay, they've lost their legs, there's treatment for that. Well, people that lose limbs also have body overheating problems because they lose surface area. Well, I know folks that have lost limbs and got that covered, but then when they go to Veterans Affairs with the secondary issue of body overheating, well, show me the day that happened to you. Well, the day that happened to you is the same day. So we find ourselves having to make a lot of the connections and drawing the lines that should be drawn for us. Mm-hmm. You know, the things we mention over time about toxicity, what would help us, what we would hope for, would be a Veterans Affairs Department that was taking those files, telling us what we've been exposed to, and then fighting on our behalf. Instead, the advocates have to come together, fight on their own, gather their own information, and then at times go to war against the government who doesn't want to admit that these things have happened.
And what can the average Canadian do to help veterans? Obviously, showing up to walks like today is one of them, but what are some of the other things?
Be a good citizen. Obey the law. Be a good citizen. Be a neighbor, right? We have 700,000 veterans across this country. One of them lives on your block. One of them's in your family somewhere, somehow. So see what they need. You know, visit them. If they're in the hospital, just the contact, the visits, it helps so much. You know, it really does. So do the simple things. This is a simple thing, and it's really helpful. But yeah, know if there's a veteran on your block, maybe shovel his snow. Even if it's not just the help, him knowing that you're trying to help, it's a big deal.
Absolutely. And as we've mentioned all day today, the Canadian Walk for Veterans is happening right across the country. And right now we're going to check in with Aaron in Ottawa to see what's happening. Aaron?
Hey, Fiona, how you doing? We're here in Ottawa, and it's a really great success today. It's been a really busy trip for me for 3 weeks, going all the way through Toronto to St. John's, Halifax, Fredericton, then back to Ottawa, Kingston. Now, did the walk this morning in Kingston, and now I'm here in the afternoon in Ottawa, and running into a lot of people that I haven't seen in ages. And it's just been a real great energy day. The media came out, and we got some great opportunities to promote the event and to promote it for next year. And I couldn't be happier. It's a great day.
Thank you so much for that, Aaron, and thank you to everyone who has been participating and working at all the walks that have been happening at 7 cities across the country. And Brian, thank you so much for everything that you've done for our country, and the thank you goes to all veterans as well. And let's cap things off and talk about this walk a little more, because obviously it gets the ball rolling and people talking. But tell us what this walk means to you, what's been happening today.
So this walk means that there will be a second annual Walk for Veterans, which of course we're going to do next year. And that's important. An effort to really get somewhere, it's got to be sustained. Anyone could do something once. We intend to bring this out and have it something that the Canadian public recognizes and is used to hearing, like a lot of the other walks that are out there. So that's one of the key takeaways from today, is that there's a tomorrow. And I mean that also for those of you that are suffering. There's a tomorrow. And we've gone over some of the ways to reach out for help, but it's as simple as just getting on our Facebook page, and you can use my name and I will talk to you and I will find you. I won't be able to solve everything, but I'm going to point you to those that can. And if I can get that message out today, success.
Excellent. So if you want to reach out to Brian, you can certainly do so. Just tag him on Facebook, find him on Facebook. He is there to point you in the right direction. And we want to thank a few people. Lafarge Lake for having us here today. Brian, thanking you for sharing your stories. To John McComb for, of course, hosting the Vancouver Walk, and to everybody who participated in the walks in 7 cities across the country. And a big shout out to Flair Airlines, who gave away a flight at each one of those walks, because that's super cool. And if you want to find out more information, all you have to do is go to the website. It is CanadianWalkForVeterans.com, and we will see you here next year. Thank you.
To go far away from home, saving lives, waiting hearts and minds.